Good morning. Thank you, Robert, for that kind welcome. I'm excited to be speaking to you this morning. I've attended many STAFDA conventions in the past and have enjoyed speakers from Colin Powell to Marshall Jones and Stuart Varney to Jeff Campbell. I'm honored to share the same stage that those guys have occupied in the past. I want to thank STAFDA's Board of Directors for giving me and our organization this opportunity. I also want to thank you guys that are sitting down front because you really boosted Mike, Roberts, and my confidence this morning. As we were standing here, when the doors opened, there was a rush of people to sit at the front to get a better view of Mike, Robert, and myself, so I wanted to thank you guys as well. You know, when Georgia first contacted me about giving the Associate State of the Industry speech, she asked that I talk about the Buy American legislation. As the months progressed, she suggested I expand the scope of my talk to address a wider range of issues that are impacting our industry. My speech content has evolved over the course of this year. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, evolution. I'm going to talk to you about evolution and diapers. I'll cover the evolution of my career, our organization, and our industry. My first position in 1991, after graduating from Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina, was as an accountant. My life was the exciting world of debits, credits, journal entries, and bank reconciliations. My career changed ever so slightly when I became CFO for Marmac in 1998. My responsibilities evolved into profit and loss statements, treasury management, and executive services. Next, my career took me down the path of sales and sourcing. Things were about to get really exciting for me. In the early 2000s, I led our organization's efforts in international sourcing, while simultaneously having direct sales responsibilities for Texas and Oklahoma. So here I am, a buyer and a seller for Marmac. I recall getting out of my rental car one day near DFW after having made a sales call in Dallas. As I stepped out of the car to walk into a restaurant for lunch, I realized that I had become an accountant's worst enemy. I could make all decisions regarding buying, selling, and credit for my accounts. My career finally evolved to its present state, where I was named president of Marmac in July 2009. Since that time, life has been about driving our strategy through the organization and allocating our human resources in the most effective manner. As president of our company, I am a non-family executive in a family-owned and operated business. Our current CEO and sole shareholder is John W. Martin III. John is a second-generation business owner, and two of his sons now work for me in our business. While there are many challenges that come with being a non-family executive in a family-run business, I consider it an honor to bridge the gap in leadership from the second to third generations of the Martin family. You can see that my career has evolved from an entry-level staff accountant in the early 1990s to my present role as president. Likewise, the evolution of Marmac presents an interesting story to be told. But first, I wanted to tell you about our town. Robert talked about Jacksonville. You may hear from our next speaker about Wasilla. But I wanted to tell you about our town of McBee. Now, if you saw it on a map, you would probably call it McBee. But we call it McBee. We don't host a marathon. We don't host the TPC. We don't have the Jacksonville Jaguars. We have one Baptist church, one Presbyterian church, a Huddle House restaurant, a Subway restaurant, and our most prized landmark, our one stoplight. But our organization, let's get back to our organization. Our organization has evolved from a one-operation manufacturer to a leading supplier of concrete accessories and carbon steel industrial wires. The company first manufactured, marketed, and sold diapers in 1953. See, I wasn't kidding when I said I was going to talk about diapers. Marmac's first product was a cloth diaper that was used to form and apply grout to the joints of concrete pipe. At this point in our history, we only had a sewing division. In the early 1960s, we evolved again when we started a wire fabrication division. That wire product is similar to one we sell today, but in the early years, it was used to secure the diapers to concrete pipe. The company moved into another phase in the late 1970s when it started wire manufacturing. After nearly 15 years of fabricating bar ties, our founder, J.W. Martin Jr., wanted more control of his source of supply. So he began manufacturing, which included drawing and annealing the raw material needed for his bar ties. In the first decade of this century, the company has evolved at a faster pace than in each of the previous 5 decades. As careers, organizations, and industries evolve, they often encounter turmoil and uncertainty. Our CEO has a favorite quote regarding our industry: "Turmoil and uncertainty are the order of the day." Our industry and its supply chains have definitely been filled with turmoil and uncertainty in 2010. For the balance of my time this morning, I want to talk about 3 aspects of our industry and how they have evolved. Let's first talk about the evolution, turmoil, and uncertainty in ocean transportation. As you know, a lot of the products our industry buys and sells are imported, with the bulk of them coming from China. This trans-Pacific trade lane has faced unprecedented turmoil and uncertainty in 2010. Since 1990, the westbound Trans-Pacific Stabilization Agreement has introduced a certain amount of stability in rates, availability, and service levels. Certain aspects of these trade lanes were predictable. There were general rate increases implemented in May of each year that drove your costs up. Peak season surcharges were implemented each year, corresponding to the flow of goods into the U.S. for the Christmas season. Service levels, including supply and demand, and transit times were fairly predictable. Many of these market factors changed in 2010 as the trans-Pacific trade evolved and faced serious problems. In the economic expansion leading up to 2008, ocean carriers saw an infinite opportunity for their organizations. They began to invest in newer, larger ships. Some of this was driven by fleet age, some of it was driven by demand, and some was driven by the expansion of the Panama Canal. As a result, there was a glut of new capacity coming online around the same time the global economy crashed in 2008. At that same time, carriers were controlling capacity. Rates were beginning to climb, slowly and somewhat naturally. In typical carrier fashion, they furiously began undercutting each other as demand fell and capacity rose. During all this, they were saying rates would go up. They needed to. They were at unsustainable lows. There were at least 3 carriers at risk last spring. The failure of a major line would in effect bring capacity back in balance with demand. Then something different and unexpected happened. None of the carriers became defunct. Instead, they reduced capacity by anchoring their ships. They also took some of their older boats out of service. Earlier this year, there were hundreds of ships sitting offshore around Hong Kong. This allowed carriers to raise rates, and service times were extended by as much as 30 days. In an earlier phase of trans-Pacific transportation, carriers would have never idled capacity. But in today's market of turmoil and uncertainty, they took unprecedented measures that adversely affected our industry by driving up cost and increasing the amount of capital required to operate. Steel is the second aspect of our industry that has evolved over time. In the early years, the steel industry had one primary cost driver, and the steel markets were national, if not regional. We've seen unprecedented volatility in the steel and wire market over the past 6 years. The events of 2004 were a precursor of future market fluctuations. The events of 2008 created drastic changes in a short period of time, while the events of 2010 nearly defied economic principles, in that there has been inflationary pricing while supply is abundant and demand is relatively low. As we approach the fourth quarter, typically a period of low construction activity, there were announcements of further increases in steel prices. We do not have all the answers at Marmac about where the steel industry will go next. We, like you, have questions. The big questions in front of us now are, will the level of uncertainty and volatility of the previous 24 months continue? And what does the future hold? There are many variables that affect pricing and availability of wire rod and rebar in the U.S. market. It is truly a global economy whereby events in Istanbul, Dubai, and Shanghai can affect the price of rebar in Memphis, Denver, and Houston. If you attend various steel conferences, you'll quickly note similarities regardless of the sponsor. The speakers and presenters come from the same industry segments. For example, scrap, steel producers, or trading companies. Within the past 18 months, there's been a new group added to the agenda at steel conferences. These speakers are not just from a different segment of the steel supply chain, but from an entirely different sector, the financial market. The steel market has caught the eye of financiers in London, Shanghai, and Chicago. In the recent past, steel futures have been introduced by various financial exchanges. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange now offers hot-rolled coil futures. The London's Metal Exchange offers billet futures. And the Shanghai Futures Exchange now offers rebar futures. Why have these people entered the steel market? Would they be offering futures contracts unless they saw an opportunity to generate large profits? Are they more likely to generate large profits in a stable or a volatile market? Those experts likely generate profits in markets full of uncertainty and turmoil. Think about a key reason futures exist. They exist to help professionals manage risk in relation to price volatility. The mere fact that these products are now available on the market is evidence that the investors in these international cities are expecting a volatile, uncertain steel market. How do you and I plan for these uncertain market conditions? My advice to you is to forget history. Move away from using history as an indicator of the future. The market is too unpredictable and full of too much turmoil and change. Finally, let's talk about the evolution of Buy American. What do references to Buy American in federal legislation mean? First, let's review the legislation that Congress has enacted over the years. As we do, the answer should become more clear. The origin of Buy American legislation dates back to 1933. The first act requiring the use of American-made products in federal procurement was signed into law by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. It encouraged the use of goods produced domestically in the USA. For all of the federal government's direct procurements, however, this act was loosely interpreted and enforced in most cases by the marketplace. The Surface Transportation Assistance Act of 1982 expanded the direct procurement coverage. It specifically focused on the nation's infrastructure by requiring products permanently incorporated into such products to be domestically produced. It was largely left to the various state departments of transportation to enforce this act. Then finally, we have the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, commonly referred to as the economic stimulus. It is more specific in that it states that manufacturing processes for steel construction products should take place in the U.S. and goes so far as to define the process to include melting, pouring, rolling, and the like. The Buy American topic garnered a lot of headlines in the days after the economic stimulus was signed into law. Discussions on this subject filled the airwaves, and most of the debate revolved around how to interpret and apply these provisions. While there were debates in the initial phase as to the clarity and ambiguity of the Buy American provisions, the marketplace seems to be sorting out the answers. Our organization has noticed a change in ordering patterns as it relates to Buy American. There seems to be more conscientious effort to ensure compliance from the state level all the way down to the individual contractors. We have experienced an increase in the number of inquiries and products that can meet the Buy American requirements. The increased emphasis to comply with these provisions is far-reaching. We have shipped Buy American certified products from north to south and coast to coast. In the early years of Buy American legislation, there was a lot of leeway on how to interpret these provisions. It seems by the economic stimulus to tighten the interpretations were successful, based upon the reception we have seen in the marketplace. So what does the Buy American Act mean for STAFDA manufacturers and distributors? Well, for manufacturers, we must ensure that we have data collection and product marking processes in place. We have to trace the raw materials consumed in our production processes through to the products that we provide you, our distributors. The requirements of certifying goods to be Buy American compliant are more stringent than identifying goods as made in the USA. This results in increased requirements. The results in increased requirements on U.S. manufacturers to be able to validate our goods Typically, with increased requirements of manufacturers come increased costs to produce. But these costs can many times be recaptured from the consumer. Marmac provides its customers Buy American certifications that guarantee our premium wire products are compliant with the ARRA. And these products are easily identifiable by our Buy American Eagle. For distributors, what are the opportunities that the ARRA presents to your organization? The opportunities we see for distributors are chances to grow your revenue stream in a down economy. There are projects across the country being funded under the ARRA. They vary in scope and size, but they do exist. You can identify these projects via various government websites or through a number of subscribed online services. But once you've identified these jobs, what's your strategy, or how will you differentiate your organization? Our suggestion is pretty simple. You educate your sales staff. Educating your sales team on the ins and outs of the ARRA and products that comply is important because they'll likely encounter situations in which their competitors are attempting to supply non-compliant products. Marmac is not a U.S. government-appointed expert on the subject, but we have built a vast knowledge base on ARRA over the past 18 months. Evolution. It is a gradual process in which something passes through phases or stages. Careers evolve, organizations evolve, industries evolve, as do many aspects of those industries. I hope your business, like ours, evolves well past the diaper stage. Thank you again, STAFDA, for this opportunity.